The first thing I remember is the sound of paper tearing. Sharp, bright, everywhere. My little cousin screamed with excitement as glittery wrapping paper flew into the air. My aunt laughed from the couch. Someone turned the music louder. The smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon candles filled the house. And for a moment, I thought everything was normal. I was standing near the end of the long dining table, holding a cup of lukewarm apple cider, watching everyone reach for the pile of gifts stacked near the fireplace. My mom was standing there too, smiling, handing them out one by one. My brother first, then my cousin, then my aunt, then my uncle. Every name called was followed by cheers, laughter, the ripping of wrapping paper, someone shouting, "Oh my God, I love this!" I waited. Of course I did, because my name had to be somewhere in that pile, right? I shifted my weight from one foot to the other, pretending to check my phone, pretending I wasn't watching every single gift leave that stack. Mom kept smiling. She reached down again. Another gift. Another name. Not mine. My stomach tightened a little, but I told myself the obvious explanation. Maybe she was saving mine for last. Mothers do that sometimes, the special one at the end. So I kept standing there, smiling when other people smiled, laughing when they laughed, trying to ignore the quiet thought crawling into my mind. Then my brother held up a new watch. My cousin got a designer scarf. My aunt started crying over a framed family photo. And the pile of gifts started getting smaller. I felt my fingers tighten around the warm cup, still not worried. Not yet, because there were still 2 boxes left. Mom picked one up. "Okay, this one is for Uncle Ray," she said. Everyone clapped. I watched him tear it open. A leather wallet, more laughter, more hugs. And suddenly there was only one gift left. A small rectangular box, wrapped in deep red paper. For a second, my chest relaxed. There it is. Mine. I could already feel the quiet relief forming in my chest, the tiny laugh I would give when she finally called my name and everyone realized it had just been delayed. Mom reached for the box. She looked around the room, and then she said, "Oh, this one is for Sarah." My cousin Sarah gasped and ran forward. The room exploded with cheers again. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. Because for a second, my brain didn't understand what had just happened. Sarah hugged my mom, ripped open the paper, and pulled out a silver bracelet. Everyone leaned closer to admire it. Someone said, "That's beautiful." Someone else said, "You're so lucky." And my mom just stood there smiling like the happiest person in the room. The empty floor where the gift pile used to be stared back at me. Nothing left. Not even a mistake. Not even something small that had fallen behind the chair. Just bare hardwood. And the quiet, uncomfortable truth beginning to settle into my chest. My name had never been called. Not once. I forced myself to laugh when someone told a joke near the couch. I took another sip of cider even though it had gone cold. Because maybe she forgot. Right? It happens. People forget things, especially during big family dinners. But then something strange happened. Mom started collecting the torn wrapping paper, casually, calmly, like the night was already moving on. No apology, no, "Oh wait," no sudden realization, nothing, just moving on. And that's when the room slowly started to notice. My aunt's smile faded first. My brother glanced at me, then at Mom, then back at me again. I could feel the silence creeping into the spaces between conversations. No one said anything, but people were looking, not directly, just quick glances. The kind that disappear the second you turn your head. I told myself not to react, not here, not in front of everyone, but inside my chest something heavy was forming, because this didn't feel like forgetting. Forgetting looks messy, confused, embarrassed. This felt clean, deliberate. I stepped closer to the table just to keep my hands busy. Picked up an empty plate, stacked it with the others. Behind me, Sarah was still showing off the bracelet. Mom laughed at something my uncle said, her voice light, relaxed, like absolutely nothing unusual had happened tonight. And suddenly a quiet thought slipped into my mind, a thought so sharp it made my stomach twist. She knows exactly what she did. My chest tightened, because if this wasn't a mistake, then it meant something worse, something intentional. I looked across the room at her, my mom, still smiling, still laughing with everyone else. And for the first time that night, a cold realization settled in my bones. This wasn't an accident. This was a message. And the worst part? Everyone in that room had just watched it happen. No one said a word. No one stopped it. No one asked why. The music kept playing. The family kept laughing. The night kept moving forward. But something inside me had already cracked open. Something quiet. Something final. And deep down, a question started forming that I couldn't stop thinking about. Why? Why me? Porque en ese momento, algo dentro de mí susurró una verdad que todavía no estaba listo para aceptar. A veces, el regalo que no recibes es la primera señal de que ya no te quieren en la familia. And standing there in the middle of that warm, glowing Thanksgiving room, I suddenly felt colder than I had ever felt in my life. The house was quiet the next morning. Too quiet. Thanksgiving had always been loud in our home, dishes clattering in the kitchen, relatives talking over each other, the television humming in the background with football games no one was really watching. But the day after, it felt different. I woke up later than usual, staring at the ceiling for a long time before I even moved. My mind replayed the night again and again, the laughter, the gifts, the empty space where my name should have been. Part of me kept trying to rewrite it. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe I missed something. Maybe she left my gift somewhere else. But deep down, I knew the truth already. Still, I walked downstairs anyway. The kitchen smelled like leftover turkey and cold stuffing. Plates were stacked near the sink. Someone had already cleaned most of the living room, but a few torn ribbons still sat on the coffee table like small reminders of what had happened. Mom stood at the counter making coffee. She looked up when I walked in, and she smiled. The same smile she had used the night before. "Morning," she said casually. Morning, just that. No apology, no explanation, not even a pause. I waited for a second, standing there near the doorway, almost expecting the rest of the sentence to come. "Oh, by the way, I forgot your gift last night," but nothing followed. She poured coffee into a mug like it was any other Friday morning, like Thanksgiving had ended normally, like I hadn't stood there in front of the entire family being quietly erased. I grabbed a glass from the cabinet just to keep my hands busy. The silence between us stretched longer than it should have. Then she said something that made my stomach twist. "Your aunt texted me. Everyone said they had a great time." I nodded slowly. "Yeah," I muttered, "a great time." I wondered if anyone mentioned it, if anyone had asked her later that night, "Hey, why didn't Naeem get a gift?" But judging by how calm she looked, the answer was probably no. People notice things. They just don't always want to talk about them. The next few days passed like that. Quiet. Strange. Uncomfortable. The house felt colder somehow, even though nothing had technically changed. Mom moved through the rooms the same way she always did, cooking, answering phone calls, running errands. But every interaction between us felt thinner, like a fragile sheet of glass stretched over something neither of us wanted to touch. My brother avoided eye contact most of the time, not in a cruel way, more like someone who had witnessed something awkward and didn't know how to address it. Once in the hallway, he opened his mouth like he wanted to say something. Then he stopped. "Never mind," he said quietly, and walked away. That moment stayed with me longer than it should have, because silence like that usually means one thing. People know more than they're saying. I started noticing other small things too. Whispers in the kitchen when I entered the room. Conversations that ended abruptly. Mom checking her phone more often than usual. One evening I walked into the living room and she quickly flipped her screen face down on the table. The motion was fast, almost nervous. Our eyes met for a split second. Then she forced another smile. "Dinner's in 20 minutes, she said. I nodded and walked past her, but something in my chest tightened again, because that look, it wasn't guilt, it was caution, like someone guarding a secret they couldn't afford to let slip. The thought followed me for the rest of the week. Maybe the gift thing wasn't random. Maybe it wasn't even about gifts at all. Maybe it was something else entirely. A few days later, my cousin Sarah texted me, which was strange because we didn't usually talk much outside family gatherings. Her message was simple. "Hey, are you okay?" I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. "Yeah, why?" 3 little dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, she sent another message. "I just thought Thanksgiving was weird." Weird. That was one way to describe it. I typed back slowly. "What do you mean?" The typing dots came back, paused, then came her answer. "I don't know. It just felt like something was going on." My heart started beating a little faster. "What kind of something?" She didn't reply right away. Minutes passed, long enough for doubt to creep back into my head. Maybe I was reading too much into everything. Maybe the whole thing really was just a forgotten gift. But then her next message arrived. "Never mind. It's probably nothing. Probably nothing." Those 2 words sat on the screen like a locked door, because people only say that when they're holding something back. That night, I lay in bed staring at the dark ceiling again, thinking about the way Mom avoided the subject, thinking about the quick glances between relatives, thinking about the whispers that stopped when I entered a room, and slowly, a new realization started forming. The gift incident might have been the first crack, but it wasn't the whole story, not even close. Somewhere beneath all of this, there was something bigger hiding, something the family knew, something my mom didn't want anyone talking about. Porque a veces, el silencio de una familia es más peligroso que cualquier mentira. And as I lay there in the dark, another thought crept into my mind, a thought that made sleep impossible. Tal vez el problema nunca fue el regalo. Tal vez yo era el problema. And if that was true, then Thanksgiving had only been the beginning. A few days after that message from Sarah, things started shifting in ways I couldn't ignore anymore. It began with a phone call, not to me, to my mom. I was sitting at the kitchen table pretending to read something on my laptop when her phone rang on the counter. She glanced at the screen and hesitated for a split second before answering. Her voice immediately changed, lower, careful. "Hello?" she said. There was a pause. Then she walked into the hallway and closed the door behind her. That alone wasn't unusual. People take private calls all the time, but something about the way she moved, fast, controlled, made me look up from my screen. Through the thin wall, I could hear muffled pieces of the conversation. "That's not what happened." Another pause. "I already told you. He doesn't know." My fingers froze above the keyboard. "He doesn't know." The words sat in the air long after she said them. I leaned back slowly, trying to listen without making it obvious. Her voice dropped even lower. "You weren't supposed to contact him." Contact him. My heartbeat picked up, because there was only one him in this house, and suddenly every strange moment from the past week began lining up in my head like puzzle pieces. The whispers, the nervous glances, Sarah's message, the deliberate silence about Thanksgiving. Something was happening around me, and somehow, I was the last person meant to find out. Mom came back into the kitchen a minute later. Her expression was calm again, but the calm looked forced now that I was really watching. "Who was that?" I asked casually. She didn't even blink. "Just work." Work. The answer came too fast, too smooth. I nodded slowly, pretending to believe it. But inside, the quiet suspicion that had been growing all week turned into something sharper. Doubt. Because that call didn't sound like work. It sounded like damage control. 2 days later, another crack appeared. This time it came from my Uncle Ray. He texted me late at night, which was strange by itself. My uncle wasn't the texting type. Most of the time he barely used his phone. The message was short. "Hey kid, everything all right at home?" I stared at the words. They felt almost identical to Sarah's message earlier that week. Different person. Same question. I typed back. "Yeah, why?" The response took a while, long enough that I wondered if he regretted sending it. Then finally, another message appeared. "Just checking in. Just checking in." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. People don't randomly check in like that. Not twice in 1 week. Not after a family gathering where everyone clearly noticed something was wrong. The thought made my chest tighten. They know something, but they're not telling me. The next morning, I noticed something else. Mom had left her laptop open on the dining table. That never happened. She was usually careful about things like that. The screen was still glowing when I walked past. At first, I wasn't even trying to look, but then one word caught my eye. My name, right there in the middle of an email. My feet stopped moving. I glanced toward the hallway. The shower was running upstairs. She was busy. Slowly, almost against my better judgment, I stepped closer. The message wasn't fully visible, but I could see enough to understand the tone. This situation cannot escalate further. If he finds out before we explain, the family is already asking questions. My chest tightened with every line. The email wasn't from a friend. It wasn't from a coworker. It was from someone with a professional signature at the bottom, a name I didn't recognize, a title, and an office address. My pulse started pounding in my ears. Why would a professional, someone outside our family, be writing emails about me? I leaned closer to the screen, but just as I tried to scroll down, the sound of footsteps creaked from the stairs. I stepped away instantly. Mom walked into the dining room seconds later, drying her hair with a towel. Her eyes landed on the laptop, then on me. Just for a moment. The silence between us stretched again. "Did you need something?" she asked. Her voice was calm, but her gaze was sharp now, watching, measuring. I shook my head. "No, just getting water." She nodded slowly and closed the laptop without another word. That was the moment something inside me finally shifted, because up until then, a part of me had still been hoping there was some innocent explanation for everything. But emails, phone calls, relatives asking strange questions. None of that happens over a forgotten Thanksgiving gift. It happens when a lie starts slipping. That night, my phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from Sarah. But it wasn't just a short check-in. It was a single sentence that made my stomach drop. "Did your mom ever tell you why some people in the family think you shouldn't know about the house?" I stared at the message like it was written in another language. The house. What house? My fingers hovered above the keyboard. "What do you mean?" Her reply came almost immediately, then disappeared. She had started typing, stopped, started again, and finally, the message appeared. "I thought you already knew." The room felt smaller suddenly, because I didn't know. Not about any house, not about any secret, not about whatever my mom had been telling the rest of the family. But one thing was becoming painfully clear. Thanksgiving hadn't just been awkward. It had been a signal, a public one, a way to quietly push me outside something I didn't even realize existed. Porque a veces, las familias no esconden secretos para protegerte, los esconden para protegerse de ti. And the more I thought about it, the more a terrifying possibility began forming in my mind. What if the reason I didn't get a gift that night was because my mom didn't see me as part of the family anymore? 7 days after Thanksgiving, I heard a knock on the door. Not the casual kind, not the quick tap of a neighbor or the lazy knock of a delivery driver. It was firm, measured. The kind of knock that makes a house feel suddenly smaller. I was in the living room when it happened. Mom was upstairs, moving around in her bedroom. The television was on low volume, but I muted it without even thinking. The knock came again. 3 steady hits. My chest tightened as I stood up. For a moment, I just stood there in the middle of the room, staring at the door like it might open by itself. We weren't expecting anyone. At least, I wasn't. I walked across the floor slowly, every step feeling heavier than the last. When I opened the door, 2 men and a woman were standing on the porch. They looked official, not police, but close enough to carry the same kind of quiet authority. One of the men stepped forward slightly. "Are you Naeem?" he asked. My stomach dropped. "Yes." He nodded once. "We were hoping to speak with you." Before I could ask anything else, I heard footsteps behind me. Fast ones. Mom appeared in the hallway, and the moment she saw them, something in her face changed. It wasn't surprise. It wasn't confusion. It was fear. Real fear. She walked toward the door quickly, her voice suddenly tight. "Can I help you?" The woman on the porch spoke calmly. "We're here regarding a family property matter." Property. The word echoed in my head. I glanced at Mom. Her jaw had locked. Her hands were stiff at her sides. The man looked down at a folder he was holding. "We've been attempting to contact you for several weeks," he said to her, "but since communication hasn't been successful, we're required to verify certain details directly." Mom's voice sharpened. "There's no need for that." The woman didn't move. "I'm afraid there is." The air between them felt electric. I stood there silently, my mind racing. Property, verification, direct contact. Suddenly, Sarah's message came crashing back into my memory. "Did your mom ever tell you why some people in the family think you shouldn't know about the house?" The house. My chest tightened. "What house?" I asked before I could stop myself. The three visitors exchanged quick glances. Mom turned toward me instantly. "Naeem, go inside." Her voice was sharp now, controlled. But the man on the porch spoke again before I could move. "It may actually be important that he stays." The silence that followed felt like the entire house had stopped breathing. Mom's eyes flashed with anger. "This is a private matter." The woman shook her head slightly. "Not entirely." She opened the folder in her hands. "There appears to be confusion regarding ownership and inheritance documentation tied to the property belonging to your late father." My heart slammed against my ribs. My father. He had died years ago. The subject barely came up anymore. Mom had always handled everything connected to that part of our lives. "What does that have to do with me?" I asked. The woman looked at me carefully before answering. "According to the documents we've received, you were listed as a primary beneficiary." The words hit the air like a crack of thunder. Mom stepped forward immediately. That paperwork was updated. Her voice was fast now, defensive, but the man flipped through several pages. "That's what we're here to confirm." I felt dizzy. Beneficiary, inheritance. None of this had ever been mentioned to me, not once. My gaze slowly moved toward Mom. "Is that true?" She didn't answer right away. Her eyes stayed locked on the folder in the woman's hands, like it was a bomb waiting to explode. Finally, she spoke. "You wouldn't understand." The sentence felt like a slap. "I wouldn't understand," I repeated. The man cleared his throat gently. "For clarity, the property in question is a residential home your father owned before his passing." The room seemed to tilt slightly. A house. My father had owned a house. And somehow, everyone in my family knew about it except me. The realization hit harder than anything else, because suddenly Thanksgiving made sense. The missing gift, the whispers, the nervous looks, they weren't about a holiday mistake. They were about me, or more specifically, what I was supposed to inherit. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked quietly. Mom finally looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw something in her expression I had never seen before. Not love, not pride, but calculation. "Because," she said slowly, "it complicates things." Complicates things. My chest tightened painfully, because that wasn't an explanation. It was an admission. The woman on the porch closed the folder. "Unfortunately, the matter can't remain unresolved. Other family members have already raised concerns." Other family members. That explained the texts, the strange questions, the tension all week. People had been watching this unfold, waiting. My uncle, Sarah, everyone. And suddenly the moment from Thanksgiving flashed in my mind again. The empty floor where the gifts had been. The way Mom calmly moved on. The way no one said anything. Because they already knew. They knew what she had been trying to do. Erase me quietly. Push me out before the truth surfaced. Porque hay momentos en la vida cuando el silencio de una familia se rompe para siempre. Y cuando eso pasa, ya no hay forma de volver atrás. I looked at my mother again. Really looked at her, the woman who had raised me, protected me, or at least, I thought she had. And in that moment, one final question forced its way out. If Dad left that house to me, what exactly were you planning to do with it? The silence that followed answered everything.